Ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again to the Packernet Podcast. I am your host and resident fanalist, as always, Ryan Schlip. Check us out online, packernet.com. Find me on Twitter, pack_daddy. Well, before we get started, just wanted to give my condolences to the family of Mr. Duke Roufus, who passed away yesterday at the age of just 55. It's funny, I just randomly asked, because I didn't want to say it on the podcast without it being true. So I went to Perplexity, I went to ChatGPT, I went to Grok, and I went to all these different places, and I asked one question. If you could pick one guy to call the godfather of MMA in Wisconsin, who would it be? Unanimous, Duke Roufus. The guy is an absolute legend. He built Wisconsin's first internationally recognized MMA gym, and also is recognized much more beyond Wisconsin. I mean, he's legendary within Wisconsin, but is obviously world renowned for what he's done. A lot of the guys from my gym will go out to Roufus Sport to train on Saturdays when they're in fight camp, because that is sort of like the mecca in Wisconsin of fighting gyms, and was pretty shocked to find out today that Mr. Duke Roufus passed away at the age of just 55. And some of the guys today were talking about how they had seen him. He was working out in his gym yesterday, the day that he had passed. Completely fine. Everything's good to go. And what he did, Wisconsin is not known for a lot of stuff. If you think football or fighters or anything else, they come out of New York or Texas or other countries. Duke Roufus has actually produced fighters to come out of Wisconsin. I mean, he's kind of put Wisconsin on the map a little bit. So he is definitely somewhat still in the Wisconsin sports arena. So just wanted to give my condolences. I actually just saw him only once. I went to a fight for one of the guys from our gym, and he was there. Never formally got to meet him or anything, but the coach at our gym was a fighter for Duke Roufus back in the day, so he didn't come in today. He's pretty upset. So, anyways, just wanted to give my condolences. As for the football world, I thought a lot of today would be kind of going through the games that are coming up. There are a couple things I wanted to highlight, though, before we get that. First of all, as it was just reported here for me 32 minutes ago via Ian Rappaport, the Arizona Cardinals are once again planning to start quarterback Jacoby Brissett, while quarterback Kyler Murray, mid-foot sprain, heals per the insiders. So, just real quick, I want to go through this again. Just looking at the differences between the quarterbacks, just so we're clear, and I don't know what's better. I could be very wrong, but just my thought on this. In terms of PFF grade, again, I understand there's a lot of controversy, but it's just a general guide, whatever, I don't care. Their perspective on it, these guys are almost exactly equal, and they actually give Jacoby a slight edge because of his running ability. No, he's not as fast, but he's obviously better with his legs than Kyler, who sometimes does. Both of them are graded out well. But Kyler, 72, Jacoby, 76. Passing is 69.5 compared to 69.7. I mean, they're very, very similar. I mean, their adjusted completion percentage, their adjusted completion rate is exactly the same, 78.4. I mean, identical. Their passer ratings, 87.3, 88.6. So there's a lot of things that you look at that are nearly identical. However, a couple of the things that I noticed that were different that I think matter. Jacoby's yards per attempt are 7.1, Kyler's 6.0. It's not a massive difference, but Jacoby does push the ball down the field a little more. Average depth of target, Kyler 6.4, Jacoby 10.5. Time to throw, Kyler 2.91, Jacoby 3.23. Now, my concern has been these guys getting the ball out very, very quickly. There's no telling. I mean, for all we know, Jacoby will come in and he'll just start throwing it in 2.3 seconds the same way everybody else has the last couple of weeks, because that's what you do to attack this Packers defense. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. But my hope is that doesn't happen. My hope is that he at least tries to push the ball down the field and continues to hold the ball. 3.23 seconds is a really, really long time. I mean, even Kyler at 2.91 is a pretty long time. But you got a guy that holds the ball longer and tries to throw the ball down the field more. I think that works to our advantage in terms of getting to the quarterback and possibly being more disruptive. If you get the ball out quick and on shorter, more high percentage passes, the odds of tipped balls, interceptions, errant throws, sacks, batted, any of that stuff, the odds of that all just start going down. When you look at the pressure, when Kyler is not under pressure, the ball is coming out in 2.36 seconds, and he has a 77 grade. When he is under pressure, he's holding the ball for almost 4 seconds, but he still has a 64 grade, mostly because of his rushing ability. So that's kind of another issue with Kyler, even though sometimes you catch him and get a sack or whatever. Jacoby, even when kept clean, has a time to throw of 2.73 seconds. So he's got an 87 grade when kept clean, but he tends to hold the ball a little bit longer and probably makes better plays. The good news is, I don't know that we're going to allow him to do that very much. We're pushing 3 seconds. Probably a couple times, I'm sure. I mean, we can't get there every time in 3 seconds, but feeling pretty good about it. And better than that, when under pressure, which is nearly 50% of the time because he holds the ball longer, 51 grade, 48 passing grade, nearly 4 seconds, kind of like Kyler, not quite as much, 3.8 seconds, just a 47 passer rating. So my hope is this ends up being a better situation where you've got a guy that holds the ball longer and doesn't quite have the scramble ability that you would see from a guy like Kyler Murray. Now, here is a little bit of my concern, and maybe it shouldn't be concern, I don't know. But as of right now, it's kind of concern. I had mentioned, just as a possible theory, although I said I don't think it's true, but it's possible that it's true, that our defensive coordinator is allowing these things to happen. In other words, the reason he hasn't, quote-unquote, figured out a way to fix it is because he doesn't actually want to fix it. Because if you're playing a game where you're going to try to dink and dunk and get 20-yard drives all the way down the field, good luck. So essentially, that would mean that he is embracing bend, don't break. That would also mean that he's accepting the fact that we will not be getting pressures and sacks and we will not be getting turnovers because they're essentially taking that trade-off. We don't want to trade those punches with you. And Hafley saying, okay, if that's how you want to play it, good luck. I don't like that. Maybe it's the right move, but I don't like it. The question is, does our defensive coordinator think that way? And again, I said probably not, but it's just worth discussing because it seems a little weird that he hasn't made any adjustments to try to sort of take that away and allow them to, or force them to push the ball down the field, to kind of give them those underneath throws all the time, rather than take it away and force them to push the ball. I mean, anyways, here is a quote from Jeff Hafley in his recent press conference. The question, how do you get turnovers if they're getting the ball out fast? Right? And again, this kind of is the question where we assume that that's exactly what he wants. Here's what he said.
If you look at our yards per pass play, it's as low as I've ever seen because of that. So how do we get takeaways if teams are just going to throw the ball quick? I don't think teams are going to be able to go up and down the field like that and play the game like that and beat us.
Right. So essentially, you don't. You don't. As long as teams want to do that, as long as teams decide that's how we're going to play the Packers, it sounds like Jeff Hafley is going to allow them to do that because he just said, you're not going to beat us that way. And that's, pretty bold. It does seem to be working, I'll say. You can say that, it's annoying and it's frustrating or whatever, but outside of Dallas, and the whole point of that is the only way you're going to be able to execute that is with basically perfect execution, which the idea was that Dallas did that, at which point I wish we would have made some adjustments, but I guess whatever. But it sounds like Hafley's going to throw his hands up and say, if you want to play us that way, best of luck. My frustration with that is that I think teams are going to continue playing that way because they can see that that's their best bet. Why in the world would you drop back when you got Micah Parsons hunting you? You got Xavier McKinney playing deep. Xavier McKinney even made a comment that I thought was sort of alluding to this a little bit, but I was like, I don't want to read too much into it. But it was something to the effect of, when you play defense the way we're playing defense, it gets boring back there. And it kind of made me think, wait, are you saying that this is what they're trying to do? And it kind of sounds like it is. They're letting teams do this, play all underneath. That's why McKinney looks like he's a bum. That's why Parsons, everybody is saying he looks like a bum, and Rashawn looks like a bum, and Van Ness everybody looks like a bum. Bro, first of all, they're not. So here is essentially the trade-off. Because you can say, well, then why did we bother getting Micah Parsons if we're not? Because we can't run a defense like this if we don't have Micah Parsons. If you take Micah Parsons away from this equation, then people are going to start challenging us down the field because they're not scared of our pass rush as much anymore. They're not going to just concede deep passes. And that's the other thing. You got to understand, and I've had my qualms with this, but every single offense wants explosive plays. Everybody wants that. And defensive coordinators, their number one priority is take away explosive plays. So when you have a defensive coordinator come in and offenses will tell you, we're conceding explosive plays, Hafley is sitting back going, this is the greatest thing I've ever heard in my life. This is amazing. So it's almost like he's using this elite capital to sort of allow them to just concede no explosive plays, and it's like, we'll beat you that way. My fear is there will be very few pressures, very few sacks, very few turnovers. There might be low scores, but you're going to have a frustrated fan base. You're going to have the media saying your defense is not very good, or the players are not very good. And I'm worried especially that you're going to have players getting frustrated because Micah Parsons in Dallas, he's got great PFF grades, but nobody cares. Where are the sacks? Where are the sacks? Where are the sacks? Because that's all anybody can think about. They can't think beyond, basic numbers like sacks. They can't understand context like time to throw impacting your ability to get to the quarterback. So no sacks equal you're bad. And even though Micah knows that, he's still going to be frustrated because all his numbers have plummeted and he doesn't look like he's really contributing. Even if the defensive coordinator's telling you, hey, don't worry, you're the reason for this and you are the main driver of this and this is great, this is a wonderful thing, everybody's getting annoyed. So we'll see. I mean, it is an interesting situation to be in where you're essentially what this is the defense. We're talking about like, why did the defense get so bad after weeks 1 and 2? Bro, outside of Dallas, teams have scored 13-18, 13-18. I don't know that the defense ever got worse. I just think offenses started playing differently. The question is, how much longer are teams going to try to play this way if you can't even get to 20 points? And if our offense is able to, again, part of the issue is you don't get the ball as much, and so the Packers are going to be less likely to run up the score on people, which, again, everyone's going to get annoyed about when we should be focusing on points per drive, right? Because if you have less opportunities, there's just not, you could score a touchdown every single time and end up with like 30 points. And it's like, well, other teams are getting to 52. Okay, it's literally impossible to get to 52 if you don't have the ball enough times. So the real question is if we can keep the offense revved up and the defense can make this work at least to the point where teams are not even getting to 20 points, I guess the idea here is eventually somebody's going to want to switch that up and they're going to try to fight back. Maybe teams like Detroit or certainly not Philly. Their offense has not looked great. Baltimore, maybe, if Lamar comes back and they get that offense going a little bit, maybe they'll try to play that game and see if they can do what Dallas did. If we can execute efficiently and sort of perfectly down the field, maybe we can take out this Packers team. But it does sound like Jeff Hafley is saying, if that's what you want to do, we will let you do it. And again, as much as that annoys me because I want to see 50 sacks in a game and a bunch of picks and like that disruption that we saw before, I can't argue with the results. The results are shocking. We're only 10th in points because of that stupid 40. But again, 4 of those games, I mean, if you remove the Dallas game, I mean, this has to be one of the best scoring defenses in football. They're 5th in yards, even with the 40. So, I guess we just keep this thing revved up to 11. And if you play scared, we'll let you play scared. Because, again, as Jeff Hafley just told us, he doesn't believe that teams can beat us if they play that way. So why would he try to stop teams from playing that way? He won't. That's the answer to the question. That's the answer to why hasn't he fixed this? Why is it other teams can stop it and we can't? Oh, we can. We can. He's just, I guess, choosing not to. And again, hard to argue with the results. You watched what the Cincinnati Bengals did. this past week. Oh, the Bengals are bad. The Bengals are terrible. No, they were bad when they played other teams. Or excuse me, they were bad when they had a different quarterback. All right, Cleveland's defense kept Joe Burrow to 17. That next week they went to Jacksonville. Burrow and those receivers scored 31 points. Then the other quarterback came in and they sucked. Then they put in Joe Flacco. He scores 33 points against the Pittsburgh Steelers defense. Only managed 18 against ours. Why? Look at the way they played. I mean, you know, it was funny because I even mentioned on the podcast right away, first play, what happened? Joe Flacco, I don't know if it's first play, but one of the first plays I watched, Joe Flacco drops back and I'm watching that end zone cam and everybody's covered and he ends up getting sacked. So they're taking those things away. But what happens throughout the game? He's hitting some deep shots and it ends up being a shootout, 33-31 shootout. That didn't happen with us. He had some pretty relatively deep throws and most of those were miraculous, extremely tight coverage, nothing you could ask a guy like Keyshawn to do better. And they managed 18. And our offense still got to 27, despite limited opportunities because of their long drives. So we'll see how things adapt as we move along. We'll see if we allow Arizona to keep playing that same game. We'll see if Arizona wants to keep playing that game. Maybe they're going to say, I don't want to do that. In fact, I'll tell you what, we'll take a break. We got some news here, but this will coincide. We'll take a break. We'll be right back. So, it's being reported cornerback Keyshawn Nixon has been added to the injury report with an illness. He is questionable for tomorrow's game at the Cardinals. So, as I was saying, it's possible that Arizona looks at the results and they say, I don't think we can dink and dunk our way down the field this whole game. We got to start taking some shots, and maybe they try that. Probably not, but let's just say for the sake of argument. And then we'll see what happens. Because it's funny, because I've been looking at it from the standpoint of offenses have figured us out, and we got to figure out how to stop them. But you look at the scores, it's like I think we have stopped them. It doesn't feel like it because they consistently can move down the field. They're completing a lot of passes. And of course, there's always the fear of that fourth quarter burnout where everybody's so dead tired that we go from the one of the best first, second, third quarter teams to one of the worst fourth quarter teams because our defense is gassed, which is a legitimate concern, especially if our offense is having an off day and they haven't sustained or built up a big enough lead. Well, now we might be in trouble. But again, it seems as though we're willing to take that risk. We'll see what Arizona decides to do. Are they going to continue doing what other people have done and mostly failed? Although weeks 1 and 2, I think teams tried to push the ball a little bit, and they certainly failed as well. But it'll be interesting. It's a little interesting game of chess, and I guess it causes me to relax a little bit. Because, again, my concern is, does Hafley not have the ability to fix this? And in reality, the situation is Hafley has absolutely the ability to fix it if he chooses to. He has chosen not to, and to good effect. Again, I don't like it, and none of us like it. None of us like a bend-don't-break defense as opposed to attacking people. But again, just thinking about it from the standpoint of a defensive coordinator, almost your entire job is preventing explosives, and teams are coming in saying, hey, truce. I surrender. No explosives. We won't even try them. But you have to kind of let us get some passes off underneath. Deal? And that's not to say it's going to be that way forever. That's just kind of what it is now. And teams are going to keep trying this. And if we continue to get the results we're getting, eventually somebody's going to try something else and say we can't just keep playing into their hand and taking these things and ending up with 18 frickin' points while their offense scores 27 every week. Like this trade-off is stupid. We're just conceding the game. And again, it's going to be important to make sure we have an offense because you have to be able to score when you get your opportunities. But it feels like that's the battle we're in right now, and so we'll just have to keep an eye on that as we go. Some additional news here on the injury or illness front. So obviously, first of all, the Keyshawn Nixon thing is pretty big because I don't know the status of Hobbs at this point. If we don't have Hobbs or Keyshawn, obviously we're going to see a lot more Valentine with Bullard in the slot. The interesting thing is you might start seeing a lot of Bo Melton playing. We just heard Matt LaFleur praise Bo Melton, talking about we'll be seeing him sooner than later, and he might not be lying. In addition, Jacob Monk has been activated off of IR, so that's, I think, good news. I like Jacob Monk, especially with how uncomfortable I've felt with our offensive line and our depth. I just feel like it gives us a little bit more stability if we can have a guy like him. Not that I want him starting, but it just kind of settles the nerves a bit. Defensive lineman Aaron Mosby, running back Pierre Strong Jr. are elevated from the practice squad to active roster for game day. So, always been a fan of Mosby. Thought he did quite well. Glad he's going to get an opportunity to kind of show his stuff again. The Pierre Strong thing is interesting. I'm going to keep scrolling here and see if I maybe missed something with the running backs, but here's Andy Herman's thoughts on it. He says, struggling to come up with a reason that Pierre Strong would be active unless there was legit concern over Josh Jacobs. You certainly don't need a fourth running back, and Wilson and Brooks are fine. Best possible reading will be that Jacobs is a game day... No, it's GDT. What is GDT? I was thinking game day decision, but that's not it. Whatever. And they want to be prepared just in case. Remember, Josh Jacobs is listed as questionable with an illness/calf injury. He was limited Wednesday, Thursday, full participant on Friday, which obviously looks good, but you never know. So maybe that's a just in case, or maybe it's, as he said, a pretty legit concern, especially since it's so specific. They probably have an idea of which way this is going. We got a lot of questionable guys. Belton is questionable. Cornerback Nate Hobbs is questionable. You have a second corner that is questionable. We didn't elevate a corner. Right, Zach Tom is questionable. That's two right tackles. Dontavian Wicks is questionable. We didn't elevate a wide receiver. You know what I mean? So it feels as though maybe there's a little bit more to it in terms of we think we're going to need this. So that may end up being unfortunate. I am a big fan of Emmanuel Wilson, so I don't feel terrible about it. But that could end up being a pretty big blow. We'll see. Hopefully that works out okay. I don't have well, whatever. We'll leave it at that. All right, why don't we start digging in? Just to give you a heads up about this, this is kind of a little bit of an up-in-the-air deal. I've been talking with a guy on the social medias. He said he doesn't want any recognition or anything, so I'll leave that alone. But him and I have kind of talked a little bit about some of the NFL betting type stuff. He's very... it's like I mentioned, it's one of those things where you can kind of dip your toe in and know a little bit, and then it takes a lot of work to get to that next level. He's kind of at that next level. And so he's kind of worked with me a little bit and understanding some of this. And we talked a little bit about possibly doing a NFL betting podcast, and that would be sort of just like a 1 day a week kind of a deal. And I thought, yeah, let's give her a little test run. We just started talking about this like yesterday, so it's very much still up in the air. But I figure for today, he didn't have a lot of time to do a lot of the work, and he is going to be sort of the man behind the curtain. His ability to work this out with his schedule and my ability to disseminate the information and not sound like an idiot is going to kind of determine whether this goes anywhere. But I think for today, we'll just kind of mix it in to the general thing that I usually do, just kind of going through each game. Be a little bit of a mix of who we want to win, sort of at a basic level, and then thoughts on each individual game for those of you that are either generally interested or possibly putting a little bit of money down. I know fantasy football is much more popular than just general betting. I don't have a lot of people that reach out to me. Here we go.
Someone is at the front door.
Yep. But if you guys are out there, we'll see. We'll see how it goes. And if it does end up being its own show, we'll see if there's any reception, how many people listen to it or whatever to kind of gauge that. But okie dokie. I also, again, with the whole me disseminating the information thing, have to kind of get into a groove of how to do this because he does things very differently than I do. He's much more of a, good Lord, finding the angles and all that kind of stuff. Whereas I'm just more purely mathematical. Here's the formula, apply it to all the games, here's the answer kind of a thing. So I'll tell you what, why don't we do this? Let's go through his list first. And then we'll go through each individual game, kind of referencing back, because some of this stuff applies to multiple games. So one of the things that he brought up that was actually quite interesting, since 2020, regular season games with double-digit wins. That's W-I-N-D-S, not W-I-N-S, windy, like air blowing fast. And that's double-digit, not two scores. Since 2020, regular season games with double-digit wins, the under is 224, 160, and 2. That's 58.3%. It makes sense, right? We've seen this. Bad weather games, a lot of times the scores are lower. And with high winds, you've got two main variables here. You can throw it deep down the field, and the inaccuracy goes up to a point where there's going to be less scores, or you abandon that and you have a little bit more of a dink and dunk type game, in which case the scores generally are going to be lower. I would think Vegas would kind of account for that a little bit, but still we see here almost 60% of the time you've got games ending up coming in under. That's plus $4,654 if you bet $100 per game. So of that 224, 160, and 2, the metric being if you just bet $100 every time on the under, you're plus $4,500. So far this week, there are week 7, there are 5 games that match. You've got the Patriots and Tennessee these are expected wins, 11 miles an hour. Carolina and the Jets, 13 miles an hour. Rams, Jacksonville, 12 miles an hour. And then 2 big ones, New Orleans and Chicago, that's in Chicago, 20 miles per hour. That's pretty big. And then the massive one here is Miami at Cleveland, 25 miles per hour. Early forecasts in Cleveland are calling for rain and wind with an average wind speed of 20 to 25 miles per hour. Since 2005, games with an average wind speed of 25 plus, the under is 13-3. When you factor all that in, especially given the situation with Cleveland, first of all, in Cleveland. Second of all, Cleveland being a strong defensive team. Then you've got the moniker of Noodle Arm Tua, who struggles to push the ball down the field. The wind could absolutely be a serious problem, especially for that offense in general, right? These are just different styles of offense. This is much more conducive to a Cleveland Browns type of game. So the under currently is set, or the total is set at 36 for that game from where I can see it. Presumably you would lean under for that. It's already a pretty low number, presumably because of the two teams as well as the weather factor with not only just the 25 mile an hour winds, but the rain. But still something to consider with Cleveland, the favorite more so. Also, again, keep in mind those other games, maybe even a little bit more so, just because I don't know if some of these might fly under the radar a little bit. A 13 mile an hour wind still fits that criteria, and maybe Vegas doesn't pick up on that quite as much in terms of plummeting the totals. The other game, and some of these numbers don't exactly line up with the numbers he had from wherever he's getting it, plus, it's been a day later. Another very interesting game, though, is the Colts and the Chargers. It's in L.A. The Colts are obviously a very good team right now. The Chargers are actually favorites, -2. It's a pretty interesting one where, and maybe it ends up being better if you end up grabbing it early. The public obviously is all over the Colts for obvious reasons. You look at the record and all that stuff. The public is hammering the Colts. The pros, the professionals, have been really leaning heavily toward the Chargers. And so there has actually been some movement from even the time that I got this list to look at to now. Money line was at -125. It's currently at -131, meaning the line is moving. However, it hasn't really crossed any sort of major thresholds here. The Chargers are still -2. And so I think a good bet would be to lean Chargers in this game, because I think the value resides in the fact that the Colts are still going to be slightly overvalued because of the public perception of the amount of money that came in on that. The next game, unfortunately, is the Lions. Again, he's got Lions at -5.5. It has moved to -6. Presumably, this is a similar situation where a lot of that pro money is coming in on that side. However, Jared Goff and Dan Campbell are 15-12-1 straight up, 20-8 against the spread off of a straight-up loss as a duo. They just lost last week. In other words, they're a good bounce-back team. The Buccaneers have a lot of injuries, which is bound to catch up to them at some point. In addition, they are at the top of the luck metrics and are due for some regression. So in other words, they're not quite as good as their record would indicate. And so it's kind of like a rubber band that's bound to bounce back at some point. Now, the Lions also do have quite a few injuries, and I just saw, in addition, some additional injury news for them that just cropped up. I'm obviously pulling really hard for Tampa, but those are the two things that are kind of pushing the money toward Detroit right now. The negative side of Tampa as well as the positive side of Detroit, not likely to fall 2 games in a row, but we'll see. The final best bet here is Titans +7. There's a lot of public money, also known as the casuals, throwing a bunch of money at the New England Patriots. A lot of people are billing this as a big Vrabel revenge game because he used to be the coach of the Titans. He's now with the Patriots. So that adds to that feeling that the Patriots are going to smash the Titans. The interesting angle here, and again, this is one of those crafty little veteran moves that I would never even think of. When a massive pile of money, and the vast majority of the public is betting on the Patriots, essentially what happens is if everybody bets on the Patriots and the Patriots win, Vegas loses. And so what Vegas will typically do is start tipping it over some key numbers like 7 points. The fact that it hasn't, it's currently +7 for the Titans. The fact that it hasn't moved beyond that to make it more enticing to push money over to the Titans would indicate that a lot of the pro money is falling on the Titans to keep that number there. In fact, in some places, it's even dropping to 6.5, meaning they feel comfortable with that number. And if they feel comfortable with the number, you should feel comfortable with the number. All right, in addition, we got another category of strong leans. We'll call these not feeling as good about it, but still feel pretty good about it. Jets money line at +100. The Panthers haven't won or covered the spread in a game, regular or postseason, that they were favored in since September of 2021. That's 4 years ago. They've lost 10 straight up and against the spread as the favorite. Carolina is barely a favorite, but they're a favorite. So this ends up being a classic buy low, sell high situation as everybody is rock bottomed out on the New York Jets. Carolina Panthers' record would indicate that they're actually more of a mediocre team than a bad team. And so the idea being if the Jets are going to win a game this year, this is their opportunity. And the Panthers are also much worse on the road than at home. So it's kind of funny because we talk about these games as being like trap games. And usually you think about that as being like a good team. You wouldn't think about Carolina getting trapped, but this does kind of have that trap game feel to it. Final lean, Saints +4.5. Saints are playing the Chicago Bears, so that is of interest. This is similar in the buy low, sell high, but this is a sell high on the Bears. The Bears have won their last 2 games, so you're feeling a little bit better about them. Again, their record would kind of indicate that they are better than they actually are, especially if you watched last week. It was a slop fest, lots of rain, tons of turnovers from a team that should have buried them. But you look at the Bears, they look better than what they are. The reality is they won their last 2 games by 1 point. This is another high-wind game, should be a lower-scoring game. Also, if you think about it, lower-scoring games, you're kind of squeezing that margin a little bit. It's hard to win by 10 if it's a lower-scoring game. So this is kind of a lean Saints +4.5. That doesn't necessarily mean the Saints win, but you are getting over that big number of 3. It's kind of a big 4.5 is a big number for a team as bad as the Bears, I guess would be a fair way to put it. Finally, we got the teaser of the week, and I'm just going to read this because this is an area where I'm going to have to learn some stuff before we turn this into a full-on podcast, because this sounds like another freaking language. Teaser of the week. We're doing a 6-pointer at -120, pairing up the Falcons and the Broncos. First leg, Falcons from +1.5 up to +7.5. It's a beautiful Wong-style teaser through both key numbers, 3 and 7. They don't have to win, just keep it within a touchdown. Second leg, Broncos from -7 down to -1. Basically, we just need Denver to win outright. You're buying yourself some breathing room in both games. That's why teasers can be powerful when used right. You're turning 2 tight spreads into one bet that leans on value numbers. Risk 120 to win 100, and if both sides hit, you cash. Did you catch that? Whatever, man. I got reading to do. All right, let's take a break. We'll just do a really quick run-through of these games, just kind of looking at it from a standpoint of like the matchups, who we need to win, what it means, and all that kind of stuff, and then we'll get out of here. We'll take a break. We'll be right back. All right, so Good Lord. This week, unlike a lot of other weeks, is actually pretty solid in terms of, I'm feeling good about the opportunity for good things to happen. Right out of the gate, Rams, Jaguars, obvious to know which way we want that to slide. The Rams are currently sitting at 4-2. By the way, the NFC right now is just a complete and total toss-up. Nobody's basically out of it. The Saints are at 1-5. They're kind of out of it. Even the 2-win teams, they're back a game and a half from us-ish, something like that. So it's not that big of a gap. We have 3 wins. The Bears have 3 wins. The Vikings have 3 wins. The Panthers have 3. The Falcons have 3. Washington has 3. And then the Eagles, the 49ers, the Seahawks, the Rams, the Lions have 4 wins, with only Tampa having 5. And again, if they lose to the Lions, which will maybe we'll save that for tomorrow, but it's obviously a pretty big, it's a very tight contest, with all of these being very important games. Rams, Jaguars and Rams both 4-2 teams. It's in Jacksonville. LA obviously on the other side of the country. So you've got a long journey. You got burning hot Jacksonville, hopefully. I don't need to tell you who we're rooting for here. The Rams are 3-point favorites, so they are the team expected to win here. But Jacksonville winning would be big, and this is all assuming that the Packers win, by the way. It does. Even if the Packers lose, it's a big deal. But we'll speak as though the Packers win this game. That would go a big way in helping us to separate from the pack, which is really tightly compact right now. Eagles-Vikings is kind of a win-win. I think, it's fairly obvious, at least to me, that Minnesota, even though the Eagles have a better record, Minnesota losing would do more for us. We need to separate within our own division first and foremost. And Eagles winning would send them to, I think they've lost 2 in a row, so I struggle to envision them losing 3 in a row, especially to the Vikings, who are kind of struggling right now. The Eagles, if they win, they go to 5-2. The Vikings would be at 3-3. That would help us if we presumably get to 4-1-1 to be able to separate even further from them. If, however, it does flip the other way, it's still acceptable, with us being ahead of Minnesota still in the division. The Eagles falling 3 games. That would put them at 4-3, and we have the Eagles coming up later this year. So the long-term vision of that is I'm not so scared of that Eagles team anymore if they can't even beat the Vikings. As for some of the injury news, pretty big injury news for the Rams. Wide receiver Puka Nacua has been ruled out for Week 7, as well as offensive tackle Rob Havenstein. As for the Jaguars, linebacker Devin Lloyd has been ruled out. Tight end Quentin Morris has been ruled out. Otherwise, aside from IR, there's some vague questionables, but that's about it. The Devin Lloyd thing is the biggest loss for them. Back to the Eagles-Vikings, because I skipped a game. Vikings have got some guys that are coming back, so the somewhat positive injury news. Blake Cashman as well as Tyler Batty, linebacker and outside linebacker, have both been activated from IR. However, Andrew Van Ginkel has been ruled out. Brian O'Neill is questionable. He is unlikely to play. That's a pretty big deal, their right tackle. And then J.J. McCarthy is such a weird situation. He is going to be activated as the 3rd emergency quarterback, which only serves to continue my conspiracy theory that they're just hiding him and don't want him to be the quarterback. But whatever, he is not going to be starting. He is not going to be playing. But I'm assuming if he's good enough, healthy enough to play as the emergency 3rd quarterback, we'll see him by next week, right? He'll be good to go, I'm sure. For sure. Center Michael Juergens also questionable if he doesn't play, and Brian O'Neill doesn't play. That's a pretty big deal. Aaron Jones still on IR. So they got some pretty critical positions there that they've got to get back from. Their opponent, the Philadelphia Eagles, tight end Grant Galsatera has been ruled out with an oblique injury. Defensive tackle Jalen Carter has a heel injury and is questionable. He is expected to play, though. That's a big deal. Same for left guard Landon Dickerson. He's pretty banged up with an ankle injury. inactive week 6, is expected to suit up. In fact, he's probably more likely than Carter. Otherwise, should be good to go. Dickerson and Carter will be the biggest guys to keep an eye on. And we got the Saints and the Bears. That one's pretty self-explanatory, rooting for the Saints to get a win on the road here in Chicago. For the Bears, their kicker Cairo Santos is going to be out again for the second week, very similar to the Packers situation. They're expected to elevate Jake Moody from the practice squad. Linebacker Noah Sewell has been ruled out. DeAndre Swift also is going to be questionable in this game, although he is expected to play. Defensive tackle Grady Jarrett is questionable. The only other guy that's somewhat or super relevant would be DJ Moore. He is also on the injury report, but he should be full go. It's just a question of whether that hip/groin injury is going to be bugging him. For the Saints, defensive tackle John Ridgeway has been ruled out. Cornerback Isaac Yiadom has a hamstring injury and is questionable. That's actually a positive because he's been out for some time. So the question is, can he actually come back? So they're not going to be worse if he doesn't play than they have been recently. It's just a matter of they could actually get better if he's able to go this week. Alvin Kamara, it's looking like he's going to be good to go. Same with wide receiver Chris Olave, who's injured, and cornerback Alante Taylor. So it's looking like they're going to be relatively healthy for this game. We'll see if Isaac Yiadom can, not that he's a great corner, but if he can go, that'd help. The Panthers-Jets, I don't super care about. We could say that we're worried a little bit about Carolina, but at this time, I'm not. Raiders-Chiefs, likewise, I don't super care. I would love for the Chiefs to lose, but it really has no bearing on us as an AFC team. Plus, they're 12-point favorites, so I'm not going to put a lot of energy into that. Same goes for Patriots-Titans, Miami and the Browns, Giants-Broncos, Giants in a similar boat. You could argue that they're worth paying attention to, but I'm not going to, and they're also 7-point underdogs against the Broncos. Colts-Chargers, don't care. Then we've got Packers-Cardinals. We've obviously already gone over that, including the injury report stuff. The only interesting thing that I would add here is that we went from 6.5-point favorites to 7-point favorites. I don't know if that's going to make you feel more nervous or what. Makes me feel a little bit more nervous, but I guess it's a good thing that for whatever reason, confidence is going up. It's probably Kyler Murray. Kyler maybe moved that 0.5 point. Not sure how long ago that happened, but since I last looked, it was 6.5. As of right now, it's 7. Dallas and Washington. This is shaping up to be a little bit more of an interesting fight. Dallas in a bit of a spiral here at 2-3-1. I mean, they're looking like a pretty rough team. They won one game in overtime against the Giants. They tied the Packers. They beat the Jets. It was a pretty handy, by a decent margin, but still, the Giants and Jets and your only 2 wins, losing to the Eagles, the Bears, and the Panthers. It's looking pretty rough. Still, Washington has yet to establish itself. They haven't won 2 games back-to-back yet. They beat the Giants, the Raiders, and the Chargers being somewhat impressive, but otherwise pretty terrible teams, losing to the Packers, the Falcons, and the Bears. Neither team really able to establish itself as any kind of a contender, so this will be somewhat of an interesting one. For Dallas, cornerback Trayvon Diggs has been ruled out with a concussion. Guard Trevor Keegan is ruled out. Cornerback Kalen Carson, questionable. Marshawn Nealon, Jonathan Mingo, Mozzie Smith, also all questionable. For Washington, Deebo Samuel has been ruled out with a heel injury. He is not going to be traveling with the team. That's a big loss. Terry McLaurin, ruled out. Massive loss. He's missed the last 4 games now, so no Deebo, no Terry McLaurin. Want to make matters even worse? Wide receiver Noah Brown, out. Placed on IR this week. Durant Armstrong, guard Sam Cosmi, tight end Zach Ertz, and cornerback Jonathan Jones are all questionable in this game. So, real rough situation for the Commanders here, but Dallas not really putting up much of a fight. We'll see how it goes. And then finally, Atlanta Falcons and San Francisco 49ers. Falcons are actually at 3-2, but the 49ers, who I also hate, are at 4-2, so I'll be absolutely pulling for the Atlanta Falcons. It is worth noting, however, the Falcons are on a 2-game win streak. They've won 3 of their last 4 games. It's a very weird 30-0 loss to the Carolina Panthers. Otherwise, they beat the Vikings. And then the last 2 weeks, they beat the Commanders 34-27 and then the Bills 24-14. So it really depends how you look at it. I mean, if you look at that Bills game coming out of a bye week and say maybe that was kind of a fluke, trap game kind of deal, then you're saying, okay, you got smoked by the Panthers and you lost to Tampa. You beat a bad Vikings team and a bad Commanders team. You're not a very good team. Otherwise, you can look at it and say Washington, decent team. I don't remember if their quarterback was back yet. Probably not. And then Buffalo kind of solidifies you as a pretty solid team. 49ers, on the other hand, at 4-2. They started off 3-0, have lost 2 of their last 3 games, and their one loss came against the Rams that they won in overtime. So they were very close to going 0-3 in their last 3 games. So pretty tough matchup here with the 49ers and the Falcons, trying to gauge exactly where they're at. That's kind of how it is across the board, though, I think. As for the injury situation, Brock Purdy, the quarterback for the 49ers, has officially been ruled out. He has been participating in practice in limited fashion, but will miss his 5th game in the last 6 due to turf toe injuries. Wide receiver Ricky Pearsall also been ruled out. Marquez Valdez-Scantling, former Packer, has been placed on IR. That happened as of Friday. Also, linebacker Fred Warner is on IR. He's out for the season after surgery on a dislocated and fractured ankle. Nick Bosa is out for the season. Cornerback Travius Hodges Tomlinson and wide receiver Jacob Cowing also on IR. So they're pretty banged up, man. I mean, you look at Bosa and Fred Warner by themselves and then factor in that their quarterback has been out. That's super rough, man. That's really rough. As for the Falcons, edge rusher Jalen Walker has been ruled out with a groin injury. Cornerback Billy Bowman is out with a hamstring injury. Cornerback Clark Phillips is out with a tricep injury. Safety Jordan Fuller is out with a knee injury. Wide receiver Ray McLeod is out. Wide receiver Darnell Mooney is questionable. Tackle Jake Matthews is questionable. Tight end Felipe Franks is questionable. Defensive lineman Taquan Graham is questionable. So they've got a pretty extensive list as well. All right. Why don't we leave it at that? I'm going to get out of here. You all have a good rest of your day. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.